York for both the Pope's visit and the opening of the SDG summit at the General Assembly tomorrow. Paint a picture for us.
Well, whoever whispered that in your ear, Tabile, is absolutely correct. We are coming to you from inside a security bubble here at the United Nations. We are wrapped around by lots of law enforcement. Let's just go through some of the numbers. 7,000 police and law enforcement have been deployed across New York City, particularly here around the United Nations, ahead of the Pope's visit here tomorrow. And, of course, the kickoff of the Sustainable Development Goals Summit here tomorrow. And then, of course, next week, the 70th anniversary of the United Nations, the heads of state, a segment of the annual UN General Debate. Some 800 tons of concrete, 50 kilometers of fencing. So that just gives you an idea of how safe we feel right now. As you mentioned, President Zuma will be leading the South African delegation. He lands in New York tomorrow morning, but he is one of many. Some 193 heads of state expected for these 70th anniversary celebrations. The likes of Xi Jinping will be making a cameo appearance at the United Nations. President Vladimir Putin of Russia hasn't been to the UN in many years. He's coming. The President, the Prime Minister of India, the President of Brazil, and many, many more. So this, in many ways, is the place to be. But if you don't have to be at the UN for the next 2 weeks, it's best to stay away.
Going back to President Jacob Zuma now, he's leading the South African delegation to the UN. What will be among the focal areas of the South African delegation?
Tabile, what's that saying? When in Rome, do as the Romans do. Well, when you come to the United Nations, you talk about Security Council reform, UN reform, reforming the multilateral system in the world. That seems to be part of the annual debate here during this annual pilgrimage to the United Nations, and that will again be top of the agenda. The African position in terms of the Ezulwini consensus is that they want an expansion in both the permanent and non-permanent categories of the Council, but that's just one focal point. There will be a number of opportunities for bilateral discussions. President Barack Obama will be leading the U.S. delegation. Imagine a meeting with Vladimir Putin on issues like Ukraine and Syria. Of course, those are the two major role players in finding peace to what is now the largest humanitarian crisis in the world. There might be meetings on issues of migration. That is a big topical issue right now. The Secretary General indeed convening a meeting on migration and how the international community can better support the spillover from conflicts in Libya, in Afghanistan, Iraq, and Syria. And then in addition to that, the Security Council will convene on violent extremism, whether it's fighting ISIS in the Middle East or Boko Haram in West Africa. So a number of issues will be placed on the table here. Among them, Security Council reform and lots of handshakes between presidents, we imagine.
Sherwin, in addition to the main plenaries, there are also a number of high-level side events. Talk us through some of them.
Well, as mentioned, for example, let's take you through South Sudan. We know that President Kiir has said that he will not attend the summit. He doesn't want to be lectured to like a schoolboy, having been invited here by heads of state to participate in one of the big global issues that the United Nations is grappling with. Of course, we had a peace deal signed a few weeks ago. We know that the former Vice President Riek Machar will be here, and really the international community trying to put pressure on the South Sudanese to get through this conflict, to put in place a transitional government so that aid can, so it's not just aid flowing into the country, but that they can start reproducing oil again and really build a country like South Sudan, which is one of the poorest in the world, to make these SDGs meaningful to a country like that. So a lot of pressure on the South Sudanese leaders. There'll be side events on, as I mentioned, extremism in the world. There's a side event on Somalia. There's also a side event to celebrate 20 years since Beijing in terms of women's rights. That will be hosted by the Chinese president himself. And I imagine we'll see South Africa's former deputy president and the current executive director of UN Women playing a very big role in that come Sunday.
Sherwin, just one more thing. Do you know if Omar al-Bashir will be attending the summit?
I do know that he will not be attending the summit. His foreign minister will be leading the Sudanese delegation. Of course, I think fears around a possible citizen's arrest in the United States. A number of leading activists in the States have said if he were to set foot here, they would initiate a citizen's arrest. Of course, it would have made things very uncomfortable for a number of world leaders to share a platform with the ICC indictee, who, of course, has a warrant of arrest issued for him. So he's not coming. His foreign minister Minister will lead, and a lot of people, I imagine, here breathing a sigh of relief in that regard.
We'll have to leave it there, Sherwin. Thanks for the update.